Welcome everyone to the first session of the Stack Up series. We are excited about kicking off this series, and we have Yoyo from VoiceFlow. We'll get into that in a second. But just want to quickly share what this whole series is about. From the MLOps stacks, we recognize that there's not really a one-size-fits-all solution or a perfect stack for any particular company, even though we kind of know what the blueprint is about, right? Often it is shaped by many factors, including the use cases, the company cultures, the people that are involved and such. So as such, we want to have like an open forum to discuss with the actual MLOps practitioners to learn what works and what doesn't work for them regarding the ML stack and how it was formed and evolved over time. So our hope here is like with these learnings and insights that will help teams like yours that hopefully you can make more informed decisions about your own ML stack. Okay, with that today, the main topic is to try to unravel the complexities of MLOps and LLM ops tech stack at VoiceFlow. And today we have Yoyo joining us. Danny was scheduled to join us as well, but just like anything in real life, emergency comes up. And he had to deal with some production parts. Hopefully he'll be able to join us shortly. So with that, for the agenda for today, we'll do a quick introduction to find out about Yoyo and what VoiceFlow company is about and their ML use cases. And then we jump into their MLOps stack. And then after that, we'll be discussing about GenAI, LLMs, adoptions at VoiceFlow. And then after that, we'll take questions. So along the way, if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat, and then we'll take them at the end. All right, Yoyo, let's share. Can you help introduce yourself a little bit about yourself? And then along with that, there's like, what's your go-to comfort food or snack?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hello everyone. My name is Yoyo. I'm currently working as a machine learning engineer at VoiceFlow. I used to be a lead data scientist at a construction company. And before that, I was a data analyst for many years. So it's kind of quite a bit of years of experience behind me in data. My undergrad was in electrical engineering, and then I kind of pivoted 180 to business, and then realized I actually like engineering. So then I kind of came back and started the whole journey and just kind of stayed in data ever since. Yeah, so my go-to comfort food. So I'm in Canada, I'm in Toronto. Our weather just dropped like pretty low temperature. So like for me right now, any hot bowl of soup or like a good bowl of like really good congee would be absolutely my go-to comfort food right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right? Just thinking about it like making me feel happy.
I was in Toronto last year, and then I definitely can hear what you're saying there. Now, I do notice on your LinkedIn profile, you had something called My ML or My Tech Stack.
Yeah.
Love to hear a little bit about that. Why did you want to have it there on your LinkedIn profile?
100%. So that's kind of how I had my career transition. So I had a few career transitions throughout the years. I'm like one of those person who always have to learn something new because I get bored really quickly. So like say for example, like when I started in as a business analyst in marketing, like I was learning a lot of tools in like Google Analytics, like kind of a lot of BI tools, and then started getting into data science, started learning more kind of coding, R, Python, your pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn, and then as I'm starting to do kind of more serious work in that, and then got into the Databricks platform, started learning Spark, kind of distributed computing there, and then realized that, okay, models are great, we build models, but then you need to integrate them into an application. So I actually went to study for web development. So I learned all the JavaScript, script, like React front end, back end, so I can kind of do everything from beginning to the end. And now obviously join VoiceFlow more heavily on the engineering side, being a machine learning engineer, away from kind of the POC model building phase. now I'm kind of gathering new toolkits under my belt for, like real-time systems, pop-ups, CLI tools and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to put it there, just to show people it's like, okay, I have a very kind of wide array of interest.
That's quite impressive, because this field is it touches on many parts, not just ML but also engineering side. If you want to take those models to production, you have to kind of know the other aspects. So that's awesome that you actually take time, recognize that, and then take time to expand your skill sets and learn all these technology. That's awesome. I think you're gonna be able to fit into almost every company with that kind of diverse sets of skills.
I
Let's
was
bring back. Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Was just gonna say is I think having the like different aspects of the experience is definitely very helpful in startup world, because like if you work for a startup, you do have to work on every single aspect of the services.
Yeah, indeed, very true, especially for startup. Now let's bring back to VoiceFlow. VoiceFlow. Maybe folks out here that's here maybe not be familiar with VoiceFlow. Can you share a little bit about VoiceFlow, the company itself, and also the kinds of ML use cases at the company?
Absolutely. So we're a SaaS company. We are a collaborative platform for individuals and teams to quickly build, test, and launch their AI agents. So basically, you can come here. We have a canvas, and it's very easy to use. And then you can build your chatbots there, and then test your chatbot, and even like launch and host on our platform as well. We have quite a bit of enterprise customers, also kind of pro, more smaller scale customers and individual users as well. We have a free tier, so if you want to go try it out and play around with the tool, you're welcome. Yeah, so that's kind of the company. For ML use cases, so my main responsibility at this company is for building and maintaining our VoiceFlow NLU. So our chatbot uses natural language understanding in the background to kind of understand users' intent, to be able to kind of guide users through the journey. We have a lot of the kind of new LM use cases in our product as well. For example, I don't know, for folks who may not have the context for conversation design, in order for when you test something, in order for that to get matched into an intent, you need to give the model some training examples for utterances, like say, I want to order pizza, or you can say pizza please, something like that. It used to be you have to kind of type them in manually, but now we added the AI generated, so like you give a prompt and then it will generate everything. So that's another use case. And our latest addition for the LM side of the product offering is the knowledge base. So basically what that means is, instead of using the kind of open canvas where it's like, okay, I'm going to type a question where LM is just going to make up some stuff, you actually feed it into like your own text files, PDFs, or anything kind of internal documents, and then use that as your foundation for LM to be able to generate answer questions for you.
Got you.
So,
Okay. So it sounds like the beginning, there's a lot of NLP kind of use cases in addition to others. One, but probably sounds like the main one. And you guys are now moving toward leveraging LMs more to make it easier and faster, probably as well, for all these related NLP tasks, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, we'll have to discuss that more when we get to the LM parts. I think that's a very exciting part there, and I can definitely see the fitting of using LMs for those. Now, you guys develop models, you deploy to productions. I'm trying to think like the way you guys use models is a little bit different the way that we do at DoorDash per se. I think like because your product that you're offering are actually powered by these models directly contributing to the user experience and all that good stuff like that.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about your MLOps stack? Like what is the history, the evolution, what the current state, what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually a very good question. So because for all my previous positions, I was also kind of serving more kind of internal user base instead of external. So like ML is more of a, a tool, to generate results predictions, right? Like for customers
Right.
predicting like marketing spend
Okay.
versus return. But now like it is actually like real time, right? Like every user, when you build a chatbot, when you train your model, you need that real time prediction, right? So, having that differentiation, for even for me, it's like a huge learning. It's like the tools that really require for that to work,
Yeah.
for big models to be able to adapt to multiple domains, multiple users, multiple languages, and
Yeah.
also to be able to, right, to serve that in real time is a huge challenge, right? Like in this entire thing.
Yeah.
What I found that kind of how we evolved throughout the years is we started basically experimenting with third-party models, right? We started using with Microsoft Lewis before, um, then got pretty good response, right? Built kind of the infrastructure and the services around that to be able to serve not with our own model, just to
Hmm.
make this kind of pipeline, right? This end-to-end real-time service work. And then we start to realize a lot of limitations for using third-party models. Obviously, you don't have control over the schema, you don't have control over
I
the
see.
latency, right? You don't have control over the performance,
Yeah.
right? I think at some point they decided to deprecate the service, right? Like then it's like a huge thing for us, right? To swap out everything. So
Right.
then we decided, okay, we think we have the ability to build our own NLU. So we started from there, learn a lot of the lessons from using the third-party models and kind of start from there. But then we run into the challenges of like, how do we make that, first of all, easy to store, but
Hmm.
also being able to like reduce that latency to be able to be, used by the end users, right? With a decent response time. Yeah, so then that's when we started to kind of evaluate different vendors for their services. Like for PubSub, we have the Redis PubSub, we have Google PubSub, right? That's a system. Like, how do we want to leverage that, and which gives a better performance for storage solutions for all the user and all user models? Do we store them, as a blob in a data lake, or do we want to store them like cached somewhere, so just so that we have like that faster response rate?
Yeah.
So I think all of that is kind of what we learned throughout the years. So far, we have a decent. I think we are at a decent state of kind of we know where we are, what works and what doesn't work. So we have a relatively decentralized kind of microservice architecture where we have different services kind of talking to each other,
Hmm.
and then relying on kind of not really like locked down by vendor, but also give that ability to leverage kind of what is innate by the different offerings of the different vendor. Yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Yeah,
Obviously,
this is
still a lot
quite
of yeah,
fascinating
yeah,
because it's a little bit different than, standard MLOps stack at most other company. I heard there's a lot of like integrations between third-party models, and some of those you don't have control of, like you mentioned, like latency and such. So you
yeah,
got to design your stack such that you can easily swap in and swap out models that
yeah.
are certain part of your stack and such.
100%. One thing that was very interesting is this service called ML Gateway that we built.
Hmm.
Uh, so as we take in a user request from our runtime and then kind of generate a response back, the ML gateway now becomes like a kind of a middleware, sits in between, where then it decides where, based on what type of request this is, it decides which model it sends the request to. Did it send to the third party model, third party LM model, or does it send to our own VoiceFlow? What kind of response does it get? Then it determines what steps it needs to process the response to be, and then it
Hmm.
sends the response back. All of that still obviously designed to be able to create response within a certain latency rate. That is a pretty impressive uh, service.
Oh, so
Yeah,
like a router in a way,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
intelligent model serving router kind of thing.
100%. Yeah. And then it kind of gives us the flexibility to add on to different services and to experiment, right? Like, say, for example, if you want to iterate on different versions of an NLU, then instead of swapping everything out completely, then we can just tweak the middleware part, right? To be like, okay, now you send this part of traffic into this service and the other part of traffic into that service, and then we'll test the response.
Yeah, that's a very interesting pattern, if you will, because most company they have like a direct API to hit a certain particular model or service, right? So the client will make an API call and that goes directly to that model or the service to make predictions. We starting to see something we might need to do something like that at DoorDash as well, because we have many use cases.
Mm-hmm.
Certain use cases have different needs in terms of latencies and scale and such. And we might need like a intelligent router to decide which cluster to send it to based on the availability, the usage, and such. So that's an interesting pattern there. But you guys have very specific need for that, and you guys come up with that idea.
That's
Now,
true.
for your MLOps stack, I assume there's going to be similar pillars, right? Feature engineering, model training, model serving, and such. Which one of these are like more important than others in your company for your use cases that you guys have?
I would say, I think model deployment stack is very important because we do very quick iterations, being a startup, kind of especially now with the changes happening in LM, we need to quickly iterate on ideas, right? Adapt to the market and kind of tailor to different customers. Being able to quickly deploy something, test it if it works, does it work better than the previous one, that is a crucial component, I think, for where we are currently.
Got it. Can you go? That's very interesting too. Can you go a little bit deeper in terms of like, obviously you want to test it in a safe manner. You might want to do shadowing or A/B testing. What is that like at your company?
Yeah, for sure. So we started our journey with just simple versioning. So we'll have like version 1 model, version 2 model, and then we'll run benchmarks and obviously test in real user just to see which one kind of gives us a better performance. But then recently we're moving, about this year, we're moving towards more of a kind of blue-green deployment where we can then do a beta version with a current version, both of them in production, serving different customers, just kind of see which one gives us a better result.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you test it out with maybe a subset of customers. Okay. And then there got to be like a pipeline or flow of how to evaluate whether that model is good enough to be promoted to production.
Yes.
So there must be a very good flow of that, and also like dashboards and such. I don't know if you could add some more color in terms of how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So the metrics that we really care about for our company are obviously performance. For NLU LM specifically, we usually, because it's difficult to say, like, for example, because everybody have their own kind of different chatbots, right? It's difficult to say, like, does it perform good or not? So what we try to do is we find some industry good benchmarking data set. We just use them to compare as kind of our preliminary benchmarking results. So we have a new version of model, so we kind of benchmark against it to say, okay, does the entity, benchmark runs better? Does the intent benchmark runs better? So that's one very important, obviously performance related. But then being kind of the real-time ML services, the latency and the model size are also very important as well, right? Because bigger model probably is going to work better, right? But that means more parameters, a lot more training time, and also that increase in that prediction time. Like, is it worth it? Does it offset the performance increase for the potential gain that we're going to get from the accuracy, right? So that's another really important consideration. I think that's probably the biggest difference, I would say, working here, in kind of the real-time, space versus before, is that latency, stability, scalability are a lot more important than what I appreciated before.
Okay. Stability and scalability, is that way?
Yeah, scalability, stability is very important. Obviously cost as well, being startup, cost is obviously something we try to optimize, is also another important factor to consider. the amount of time for the training to take, right? The larger the model, the longer, the more cost, more expensive the training is going to take. And also hosting that's also going to be more expensive, right? Does that offset potentially the gain that we're going to get for the increasing customer?
Yeah, you brought up a cost factor, which is quite fascinating and it's quite relevant for a startup like your company. So, like, in terms of like metrics, do you guys have a sets of certain sets of success metrics or and such that you guys, measure and monitor and take actions on improving them? What is
Yes.
it like?
So yes. So the accuracy we just talked about, those are very important.
Mhm.
And then the cost, uh, and then also the latency per response. Those
Right.
are the key metrics that we use.
Got it. Was there a case where you guys observed like certain models that were deployed and these metrics kind of blew up? And then you kind of have to step back and say, whoa, let's re-examine this to see is this still the right solution or not?
Yeah, so actually, when the LM first blew up earlier this year, that was when the first conversation happened. Because
Uh,
obviously, when you saw how good the LM models were performing, the first thought would be, well, then why do we need our own NLU model? Why can't we just
right.
use that, right? So we started running, with this kind of same approach, started running benchmarks on accuracy performance as well as the cost and latency for that model.
Mhm.
What we actually end up learning is, LLM model being kind of a general purpose model, doesn't actually perform as good. Actually, the discrepancy was actually pretty big in terms of accuracy compared to our own VoiceFlow NLU.
Mhm.
Uh, and then the cost is a lot higher. I think we run the comparison where I think ChatGPT 4 costs like 200 something per conversation, and then our own costs like 20 cents. It was like a huge difference. And then obviously, being calling like third-party API, the latency is also really high, right? So that kind of combined to all the three metrics, it just did not end up working. That's why we kind of moved on from, at least from this phase, right? Before it gets even better, which I believe it will eventually. That we're gonna just stick with our NLU, and then we're just gonna integrate LM in some different fashion into our product offering.
Gotcha. You guys probably already started thinking about like using smaller model and fine tuning, but let's we can talk about that in the second part of
Yeah,
Gen.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, at a high level, to the extent that you can share, like what tools and technologies that your company uses in your MLOps stack.
Tools, we definitely use a lot of pub subs. Dennis, my team lead, he spent a lot of time when he first joined to build a really good CLI tool for us to use that is integrated a lot with kind of the model deployment,
Mhm.
uh, iteration process. That's another tool that we heavily use. He would tell you we over-engineered that tool. So he spent like too much time over-engineering. Now we're kind of it's a kind of sunk cost where it's like he's adding on a switch cost for us to switch other solutions, but I enjoy it from day-to-day work.
Mhm.
um, Other tools we use Redis to cache our user models for that faster response rate. Obviously Docker Kubernetes for kind of orchestrating all the different microservices for
Mhm.
different portions of the services. Datadog for monitoring. I love Datadog. I just wish they're not as expensive.
That's what I heard. It's quite expensive.
It's so expensive, and they say that it takes like $1 to build and deploy a server model, but it takes like $10 to actually monitor that it
Wow.
actually works. So yeah, it is quite expensive, but the service is pretty good. Um, yeah, I think those are the main tools.
Any other like open source tools like maybe MLflow or something other similar like that?
I don't think we currently use MLflow. I'm trying to think open source tools. So in the model development process, we use obviously open source libraries. For example, like for the clustering, we have like a lot of very segmented customer data.
Mm.
Uh, we use, sorry, not customer data, the training data. Um, we use like bird topic, all the open source language models. Yeah, but open source tools, Docker, Kubernetes, probably. would say probably that's it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's move more forward to some interesting aspects of like best practices or common pitfalls that you've seen at either at your current company or previous company.
Yeah,
Maybe you can share some of those from your experience and journey.
for sure. Yeah. Okay, so my suggestion would be to understand the use case really well and understand the limitations. So the reason I'm saying that is, for example, for my previous company, I work on a team with 2, 3 data scientists, and we don't really have a lot of support. Like we don't have a individual, like a separate infrastructure team that supports us for building everything, right? So everything relies on the 3 of us to build everything from beginning to the end, right? So having a team like that versus my current team, which we have more than 20 engineers, we have our own infrastructure engineer team supporting very well for our use cases. And then we have a lot other engineers managing different portion of the services, the front end, back end, platform, integration, all that stuff. Different setup will carry very different impact for what tool you choose, right? For the previous setting, what we valued on is to not spend a lot of engineering time, right, to invent and to build our own tool. That's why we decided to go with a platform like Databricks, right? Like it carries everything from beginning to end. It's more expensive, obviously. It carries a lot of kind of vendor lock-in, from that perspective. You have to go to Spark, but then you get in there, you can do everything, right? You can do data processing there, you can monitor your model, can serve your model, right? Like ML flow is very natively integrated, auto ML is very natively integrated. That was a huge boost in kind of data scientist productivity.
Yeah.
And it fit our use case back then. But now, since we have a bigger engineering team and we have a very specific use cases, going with a tool like Databricks, for example, may not be the necessarily best option, right? Because we need a lot more customizability. That's why we have our own internal CLI tool to help us, right? Have that better, flexibility, customizability for like exact use cases. I think that's why like now instead of relying on kind of a lot of open source or different third party platforms, where a lot of things are actually like in-house built to suit our own needs. Yeah.
That's interesting. I find a similar path with us as well. When we started out, when we were small, Databricks provides a lot of what you just said, right? The notebook service, you can train a single node, the data is right there. But as we grow, our use cases are more complex or scalability and such, then we kind of slowly, naturally branch out to what you said is building our own solution and leveraging other solutions as well. So interesting similarity there in terms of that.
Yeah, definitely. Also like reach out to people. I remember when I was trying to build a lot of stuff on my own. It's one thing where you're kind of just Googling and you're looking at different solutions. Everything looks awesome, right? Because when you go to their company page, their marketing, it's everything gonna look awesome. But then when you start reaching out to people asking about their actual use experiences, it would be like, okay, oh my God, like that service requires a lot of upfront integration just so that I can start working, right? Or some other services, even though they seem very expensive, but they provide really good value, you don't really get those if you don't start talking to people who potentially have used them or interact with them, right? So I think also like reach out to the community, right? Like find people, start chatting with them. Actually, we chose Databricks because I talked to Dennis when I was still working at a different company before, where he was kind of telling me, it's like, okay, you can go with a self-build route, or you can go with kind of more all-in-one but more expensive solutions. Yeah, so those conversations were hugely helpful in us selecting what may or may not work for our use cases.
Yeah. Related to that, I know you've been with the company about 6, 7 months, but based on what you heard from other folks or learned along the way, what would you say is like some of the critical decisions that were made early on that really contributed to the success of the MLOps stacks that currently in your company?
Yeah, I think I think that's one thing what I really admire for my current company and my current team is quick iteration.
Hmm.
Oh man, I'm surrounded by so many smart people. I just feel like every day, everybody I talk to, like they know more than I do. Um, and they work hard. Like, for example, for the utterance generation by the LM, and also, instead of kind of relying everything, you have to specify a path, right? Like, so you get your user, you get here, and I'm going to prompt you with this prompt. They designed this whole thing with open conversation, right? If you ask a question that is not in our intent kind of utterances, then it's just going to use AI as a fallback to generate answers. They was able to iterate that over one hackathon during Christmas.
Wow.
And then right after that, when they recognize, okay, could potentially turn into something, and quickly build that into a product in like less than a month. So I think that's what really impresses me is that quick iteration. Everybody like just always work together because like obviously like having a large and relatively larger engineering team right now, you need different teams to work together to make a service work, right? And I think that's another thing I realized very importantly for ML ops versus doing kind of just the model development is in order for your model to work in production, it is not just about the model. It touches on so many different services. And that like how do you coordinate and make sure it works all as a system is very important.
Yeah.
I think that is what really helped kind of move forward towards the MLOps journey is instead of just say, okay, we need everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
Work like, is this gonna work? Okay, let's try it. Okay, we have higher latency or that part doesn't work. How about let's iterate more? Let's add, instead of dumping model into data lake, let's cache them into Redis, right? Things like that. Does it work? Does it not work? How do we iterate further from there?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially in the ML world and for a startup world, right? You have to move fast with urgencies and test it out and then iterate. I think that's the what I'm hearing from you here.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, looking forward to 2024, what probably your team has started doing some planning. Interesting ideas or projects or evolutions that you guys have started discussing about what that might look like in 2024 for your MLOps stack.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I think we currently do not do a very good job at is automated testing.
Mm.
I think testing is one of those things where everybody knows it's important, but very few people actually do it and do it right. We're kind of the same similar boat here. Obviously, being a startup, we want to iterate fast, but that also means we didn't leave a lot of time on like writing good tests, making sure all the different parts of services are tested. And we start to kind of feel the pain from that, right? Because like you'll change something, you accidentally break something else. It creates a lot of kind of anxiety in production, emergencies unnecessarily. So that's one thing we really wanted to do better at in the coming future. And the other thing we already started to implement more is monitoring. Because
Mm.
there are a lot of good things you can monitor. Like say, for example, we use um, Docker, Kubernetes for our deployment for different services, right? And then one metric we start monitoring lately is like the restarts of the pods. Is it abnormally restarting more than before, right? Because sometimes like there will be a request coming in and it jams up the training pipeline, maybe it's poorly formatted or something like that. Then we can quickly get notified something is happening instead of waiting for a customer to complain, oh, this thing's not working, and then found out that way, right? So that's the monitoring piece I think are also critical. I think it's like these things are when you're developing new product, you may not necessarily think them as the most important aspect, right? But when you start to have a product start serving customers, then there's the stability, right? And that kind of just the trustworthiness of
Absolutely. Yeah.
come play.
Your customers, as the adoption increases, absolutely these two areas will become more and more critical.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
all right, thanks for sharing that. Before we jump into the next section, talking about Gen AI LMs, if folks have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat and then we'll take those at the end. So, all right, let's talk about the exciting part now. I'm sure you are well aware and been following the Gen AI LMs. And you already mentioned that your company has already started adopting some of those into your product, providing these various features for companies, for your customers, actually. But let's start at a high level. What's your thought perspective? You've been in this area for a long time. What's your reaction to what's going on right now?
It's my reaction it was just like, man, this is amazing. It's like one of those things where people keep talking about it, you're like, yeah, it will never happen. And then one day it just happens, you're like, it is really here. So I've been loving it. It just opens up like so many doors and opportunities for things to happen. Obviously, like we still have a long way to go, right? Like we just talk about like now, with LM, comparing to, kind of more targeted specific use case models, you may not perform better. And you also carries a cost and the higher latency, but all of that. But it's just like, oh man, this whole field is such an interesting development. I think it lowered we lowered so many like barrier to entries, I would say, like lowered barrier to entries for learning programming, lower barrier to entry for doing model development. Right, like you see all the LM product that's like popping up in the market right now. It's like, it's amazing.
Yeah. More and more companies are building foundational models, and you have these open source small LM models, and every week or few days, you see all these innovation from many angles. But I want one thing that I think you can speak to, given your experience with building models in the past, right? There's some people that saying that we no longer need to build and train models, classical ML models, given that these LMs can do a lot of different tasks. What's your thought on that statement? Is it true? Is it half true? We'd love to hear your take on that statement.
Yeah. I would say it is half true. So it definitely has some merit to it. Like obviously for some more kind of general purpose tasks, you can just use the API instead of building your own model. Saves a ton of time. You don't have to collect the data, deal with the messy data, and potentially, have better performance just coming out right out of the box. But then you would have also very kind of, like being a generous purpose model, you also need the special like targeted model, right? And we already talked about the kind of the cost perspective. If you have, a very specialized use case and you need that to serve, it's kind of a foundation for your services, then the cost may not necessarily justify just going is kind of using like I just saw this meme once. It's like you use a giant knife to cut like a little piece of cookie, so you may not necessarily justify for that use case. So I would say it definitely will change like some of the scenes, but not all of them, at least not right now yet.
Yeah, essentially they're trying to figure out using the right tool for the job based on what you can accomplish. Yeah. So in terms of like at your company, I'm sure you already mentioned it, but was there like a strategy in terms of adoptions of gradually and in an intelligent way of incorporating LMs into your product? Maybe can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're definitely very interested in incorporating LM into our product. We fully realize that this will be the trend. So we actually already have multiple iterations on kind of different product offering that we can incorporate our LM into. So the first one was the kind of first generation was the one that I talked about for utterance generation, as well as the fallback where we kind of have this open style dialogue instead of just what kind of human puts into the whole design. And then the second generation is we give user kind of more kind of customizability is what we call prompt chaining. Is we actually give them option to put different prompts, and they can call different models. They have a selection. Do they want to call ChatGPT? Do we want to call Llama? Do we want to call something else? The temperature, how many tokens do you want the result to be, to give them more customizability as kind of the design of your own kind of AI agents that way.
Yeah.
And the third generation iteration on the idea is the knowledge base that is already part of our product offering right now, right?
Yes.
Where instead of using the open, right, kind of potentially give you unrelated responses, you feed the model into your own knowledge base, then you use that to generate answers, for your users. We're still keep iterating on these ideas, and we'll see kind of what new generation will come out of the whole journey.
Yeah. One aspect that a lot of people talk or have been discussing is about how do you make sure these models are safe to use, especially when you start to expose them to your customers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about like evaluations, right? Guardrails and such. How do you guys approach this? What techniques you guys use or what tooling that's helpful for your guys in this area?
Yeah. So that is a great question. I don't think we have solved that question yet. I think that's like, as LM start to get more and more powerful, I think that's like one question that we're all trying to figure out how to do. What we are currently attempting to do is have our own kind of testing framework, trying to test with different prompts and to see kind of how the response is to potentially capture any, data security issues or anything kind of in this testing. So before we launch anything to the users, let's testing kind of internally before we launch a solution. But we don't really have like a good answer to that yet. Still working on it.
Yeah, definitely a lot of work in progress for a lot of companies too. It's not an easy area.
Yeah, it's not. How about you guys?
We are still in early days. We don't have anything in production yet. There's a lot of experimentations. And so, yeah, I think we are in a similar boat. But it's a very important part of what we need to incorporate before we take anything to production.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Awesome. We're getting close to the end here, so maybe just a few more questions on this. How, from your perspective, how do you see in terms of the MLOps stacks? Now with LLMs, you see, do we need like another LLM ops stack, or do you see like an extension of ML ops stack to cater to some of the specific needs of LLMs?
I agree with the latter. I don't see innate difference between like LM ops versus ML ops. Obviously, ML ops will carry more, let's say, for example, your data ingestion pipeline, right? So all of that stuff. But then you talk to the fine tuning, you also need that. So I think it's more like a special use case in the ML ops. And we're kind of just tailor your existing ML ops stacks and more tailored towards the LM side of things. That's my take on it. I don't really see like, okay, like this is a very different field compared to that. It will have its own individual challenges, obviously. But yeah, I think the same principles will apply in both fields.
I agree. I think the MLOps principles, right, still very much applicable. It's about automation, reproducibility, and monitoring, all that stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that we need additional tooling or safeguards or whatever it is to support these specific aspects of LLMs, which is quite unique from your, classical models.
True. That is very true. Yeah.
Last question before we jump into the answering the questions from the folks here. We talk about the rapid changes in this space, and it's not easy keeping up with what's going on. How do you do it? What's your approach? What's your technique? What are your go-to sources for this?
Yeah. So I would say conferences are a really good way to go. MLOps, for example, because that's where you just get, like there's curators that help you curate already like the content, right? And you get to meet people, you see what is happening in the industry. So those are great sources. There are quite a bit of meetups. A lot of them are free. That's also a good place for you to go talk to folks and just kind of see what's happening. LinkedIn is a pretty good source too. I used to get anxiety just from having LinkedIn. So every day I log in There's
Yeah.
some new paper just published, and there's like a new LLM model. It's just like do
Yes.
better than everything else. It used to give me a lot of anxiety. So I guess I want to share kind of the other side of managing that as well. I think one thing I learned over the year is to accept the limitation that I will never be able to learn everything.
Yes.
And just kind of focus on what could be the most helpful for doing my current work. Knowing that if when the time comes I need to learn something new, I will still have the resources and I'll kind of dedicate more time in doing that. I think that's also very important to know, right? The kind of mental health piece of living in this like ever changing, fast, rapid developing world of that, right? So know your limitation. Don't get, a lot like I can guarantee you a lot of people who you feel like they are learning so much that they all have their limitation too. Nobody can know everything, right? Like they all have kind of own their specialized area, right? Just kind of pick your own battle. Yeah, that's important. So
That it's 1,000% resonates with me. I do recognize that I can never keep up with all the changes going on. And one thing that I do is for the topics that I'm interested in, I actually note it down on somewhere because I know if I need it, I can go back to that resource and look it up and study it later. That helps a little bit and categorize into different buckets. Uh, so yeah, I completely agree with what you say.
yeah, that's a great way. That is a great way. I've been doing this with papers as well because every time my teams will be like, here's a new paper on this technique, and there's a new paper on that. I'll be okay. I'll just read the summary just to kind of know what this thing is about.
Yeah.
When I actually get to there, I'll be like, okay, I remember there was that paper about that thing. I need to go read deeper. But that's kind of my approach because otherwise, oh my God, it's really I don't think anyone can keep up with the kind of the speed of all the changes that's happening right now.
And you're probably most of us probably have similar I wouldn't say issue, but we tend to open a tab and leave it there that we're gonna come back and read it. We end up with like, hundreds and hundreds of tabs, right?
And also bookmarks. I have so many bookmark pages that's just like in my bookmark history. It's just like, yeah, I'll probably never get to you, but it's okay. You're there.
But yeah, I agree with like the recognition that this field is changing so fast. One person can never like keep up with everything's going on. Be focused and just knowing that if you need to, you can come back and study on the specific areas and topics for your job. I think that's when you marry the two, that's really effective.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, another thing I want to mention that really helped me is having some kind of external accountability. Like if it's an area that you really want to dive deep into,
Yeah.
uh, whether it's about learning more about ops, like actually applicable, doing applications or reading more papers, right? And what it's about. It would be great to like start a little like study group, whether it's with your coworkers or
Yeah.
like some people who are also interested in the community. Just
Yes.
meet like once a week or once every other week, just share what you learn or just like read a book together. And that's kind of what I found that really just keeps me stay up to date with the thing, right? It also helps you build that kind of relationship with people as well. And you can talk about kind of how you're using different things that you learned in your own work to share experience that way.
That's
Yeah,
a great idea. And that's also crowdsourcing knowledge from other people that they learn, they share with you as well. So it's a win-win for everybody that's in that session.
yeah, 100%. You have opportunities to have build a little bit of prototype with this thing you learn or this new tooling, just try it out and to see how it works. Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Awesome, awesome. So there are a few questions on the chat, so let's go through them. First one from Sid. As a data scientist, ML engineer, when partnering with your PM counterpart, if you have, where do you find them valuable and where do you think they can be more valuable?
Mm. Okay, so we do have PMs for our company. Where do I find them to be valuable is to help us grounded in a certain direction. How do I say that? So being a practitioner, right, having experience to all that technology is very, we can't really control it to like, I want to try everything. So having a PM there, making sure whatever we want to build actually align with the direction the product is going. You have a deadline, right? Instead of trying to make everything perfect, or trying to try everything else, right?
Yes.
You need to deliver on a certain schedule. I found that is what the most value that I get from my PMs for support. And another thing is something that may work very well in my own mind, but when I start to explain to less technical folks, then I start to see that disconnect. Like, okay, it probably doesn't work that way that I thought it was going to work. That's another thing, just to iterate the idea, right? Like kind of just brainstorm something on that perspective. Those are also very helpful for me too. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right. Next one for us. Digging into your point about using an API versus custom build, is there any framework you recommend to figure it out?
Framework as do you mean like a particular tooling or just like mental framework? So if
I
you
was
were
referring to like using an API to call ChatGPT,
yeah,
LM worlds. That might be
mental
interesting.
framework. Okay. Yeah. So that is where like you need to understand what are the key metrics, right? When Hien was talking about the key metrics, like so when we identify what our key metrics are, model performance, um, the latency and the cost, right? So that's kind of the main three things. Obviously, for different use cases, you're going to have different metrics, and then you can start just to run some comparison for the performance across different LLM models as well as your own kind of individual model and see which one outperforms what, right? And sometimes you have like this performs better here, but then is worse on the other cases, then that's kind of where you can have that conversation um, to go like with which approach makes more sense, right?
Yep. All right. And then the last one regarding LM such as ChatGPT. How do you consider data confidentiality to meet client expectation? Which is a very good question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that's what everybody's trying to figure out right now because that's the kind of the issue with generated models, right? You just don't know. You can't really control that. Guardrails for sure is one, right? I think that's like a kind of more brute force approach that people are trying to do. It's like we're just gonna artificially put some guardrails in the responses, but then obviously you see kind of different ways to break that. I think that's like the biggest concern for our enterprise customers as well, because they carry kind of the most risk in terms of that. I don't really have a good answer for you regarding that. I think knowledge base is one thing we're trying to mitigate that is instead of having that kind of open canvas, we're limiting to what you provide as what we consider safe content, right? And generate answer from there instead of from the open world. That is approach. Not sure if that will be the best approach. Obviously, we're still experimenting. Yeah, but great question.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to think about. One is the data on the wire when it gets to, let's say, OpenAI, right? And once it lands on OpenAI, we kind of a little bit, we don't have much control there. So that's where OpenAI or such vendors need to share what their solutions, how they deal with this. But before I heard of some solution about how to like anonymize or how to encrypt your prompts. That's on the way there and how it unpacks back. I still don't know how it works,
Yeah,
but that was some ideas that I saw or
interesting.
heard in the past
Interesting.
for this confidential. All right, I think we at time. So thank you, Yoyo, so much for this time. And that's great to learn from many aspects about VoiceFlow and how your team do MLOps as well as GenAI. So really appreciate your time. Any last parting thoughts for the group?
My parting thought would be just it's a very interesting field. We're lucky to be still
Yes.
considered kind of the early entries into the field. I see great potential in this. Let's just work on this together. If any folks want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to. Would love to learn more from everyone here as well.
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Yogo, again. And thanks everyone for joining this first session and looking forward to future sessions. Have a good one, everybody.
Right. Thank
Bye.
you. Have a great week.